Welcome to the Spent the Rent podcast. I am your host, Patty Rose. My guest today is the newly appointed Interim City Councilor Damien Pitts. Damien, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you.
So a little backstory about how we got here. If anybody is unfamiliar, I'm not sure how. Christine Lundberg resigned back in the summer, which created a vacant seat for the mayor. And then city councilor at the time, Sean Van Gordon, decided he was going to step up and was appointed mayor by the city council, which then made his vacant seat in Ward 1 available. And there was a few candidates that applied. You were one of them, and you were unanimously decided to be chosen as the council member. So here we are, and I'm really honored to have you on the show because you will be officially sworn in on Monday, and which is my birthday, by the way.
Oh, happy early birthday.
So thank you. So thank you for doing this. And it's really an honor to meet you. And I look forward to learning more and more about you. So this is a great opportunity.
Thank you.
So now let's just get right into it. What made you decide that you wanted to apply for the position?
Honestly, I saw it and I just like, oh, that's cool, but I think there's great power when people believe in you. They see something in you that you don't even really think about. And a few people reached out like, hey, did you see this? I really think you should apply. And I was like, no, I'm good. And then they gave me a list of reasons why I should. And I was like, this is great that you think this way of me, but like, I'm not a politician. And I don't want to be a token either, but I reached out to some of, my elders, or people that I've adopted as my elders here. And, just the sheer excitement for me even thinking about it just, made me really want to do it. And in essence, I guess I kind of got their permission, but not really. And yeah, and so here we are. I applied and I waited. And when I saw the other candidates, I was like, oh wow, it's some heavy hitters here. And so, I told myself like, hey, regardless of what happens, I'm not going to disappear. I mean, I'm pretty big personality, super extroverted, but there are things that can be done. And, like I said, regardless of what happens or what would have happened, I was definitely planning to figure out a way to build more bridges and, connect the dots and, just be present.
Sure. We had talked a little bit before we hit record about civic participation.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that one of the things with COVID that I've seen is that there's been a lot more people with this virtual setting that have gotten so much more involved. And then, Facebook's always been there, but I've also noticed for myself because of the podcast, and I've been covering local Springfield politics and whatnot. I've really grown my bubble, but as long as they say 6 feet for me, that's the law. But so it's been really interesting to see the growth in civic participation. And a little bit later in the show, we'll get back on that. I want to talk about ways that maybe you think that we could even reach out more people. So we'll get back to that a little bit later. What does it mean to you to be chosen by your council, by the peers,
It's definitely a humbling experience. I talked to people and there was somebody who told me like, I think you have a good chance to get this unanimously. I was like, there's no way. But it was crazy. And so when that happened, a lot of people called me and, I was just speechless. And for people who know me, like I'm always talking, like I'm rarely ever speechless. And so they were like, wow, you really affected by this. It was amazing, but after it all sank in, like, I don't think I slept that night really much just because first of all, it's like, wow, this is very humbling. But then two, it's like, oh crap, what did I get myself into?
Sure.
And so there were a lot of, emotions. And the one thing that I couldn't do when I found out was, call or text any of my family or friends on the East Coast because they were asleep.
Sure.
I'm sure they would have responded, but no. So I had to wait until morning to tell my parents and tell some of my friends on the East Coast who had been supporting me and all that stuff. So yeah, I mean it was it was definitely a high that I haven't experienced in a while, but reality sinks in. It's like, what next?
Sure.
I think this week is, I've been drinking from multiple fire hoses and just trying to figure out what's the next step. What do I need to learn? What do I already know? What am I going to have to grasp? What boards? I think probably 50 people have added me on Facebook. And I
Yeah.
mean, if you
Yeah.
notice, I've been posting on Facebook in like 4 years, and I'm just not a social media person. I think that has a lot to do with me being ex-military. Uh, so yeah, I mean, it's great, but there's always that fear of letting people down, or there's this fear of even safety. I mean, I know it's a city council position, but I'm sure some people are pretty upset that somebody who looks like me is or somebody that they didn't support. And so what does that mean? Addresses are public information. Is somebody gonna come for me? I don't think so, but I mean, you see how the world is now. Nothing surprises me.
No, absolutely, and that is a good thing to actually be aware of, because I mean, again, I don't agree. I agree with you that I don't think anything, I hope nothing would come of that, but it's something that is there, just any position. People don't understand what a city council member, they think of it, they don't understand it's an unpaid position. They don't understand that you're volunteering and that you're service to your community. But I think on a board, you're going to be working with some really incredible people, you know, and so I think that they're gonna take you under their wing.
I hope so.
So, you talked about the East Coast and your family back home, and you had mentioned your parents. What was
Mhm.
their reaction like? And tell me a little bit about what kind of people they are.
So, my mom grew up in Memphis, Tennessee. That's where she still lives. My dad grew up in Columbus, Georgia. Both my parents went to college. Both of them spent time away from the city that they currently live in. They just happened to end up moving back, and so they kind of have a somewhat of a world view that I think really benefited me. Both my parents love music. They love food. My mom, she's not a singer, but she sings. And she's probably one of the best cooks. She should have been a chef. She's a retired social worker. My dad, and also both of my parents were teachers. My dad, he's was actually, you know, he he went to Alabama State, which is in Montgomery, and so in the '60s, which if you know anything about Montgomery, Selma, he was right there. I think there's an interview somewhere online in it where he was at the March on Selma. So I think civic engagement is in my blood. Uh, I see. I think I look more like my mother, and I'm built more like her, and we even kind of sounded like to a certain extent. But I see a lot of my dad in me too. I mean, it's great. My parents divorced when I was young, but I was able to see my dad quite a bit, Christmas and summers, no matter where he lived. Uh, and I think it was a good experience. I never felt left out because my parents weren't married. I thought it was cool. And it's like, man, my mom gets to get a break from me and my brother
Sure.
of Christmas and summers. Like, I realized at an early age that, parents need to break away from kids too. And so I thought it was great. But, I think they really, instilled in me, staying true to yourself and, taking opportunities that you might not think that you should. That's one of the main reasons I even went in the army versus going to college first. Because my mom was like, hey, just be respectful and listen. And I did. And 10 years later, I'm getting out then going to college. So yeah, I mean, it was. I think I had a great upbringing. The history in Memphis is just, in a lot of ways, extremely fabulous. And every time I say the word Memphis, I mean, I'm proud. But Memphis has its issues, just like any other cities. I just think that Memphis highlighted quite a bit. Back in the day, people would hear Memphis like, "Oh, first 48." It's like, man, if but then you kind of see some of the things that are going on, uh, and I just think that, the stereotypes or seeing Memphis on First 48 just kind of elevates, this thought that Memphis isn't the greatest city. But I mean, I love it. And every time I go home, I just feel whole, and like my dad lives in Columbus, Georgia, which is where a massive military base is. My dad, Fort Benning, my dad wasn't military, but you see that influence and stuff, and all his family's there, and it has a pretty unique history too. And so, that old history, which isn't always positive, but that old history, from indigenous to slavery to music, it exists in that region, and I think a lot of that played a massive part in who I am today.
Yeah. So now this whole process has been kind of a whirlwind, has happened fast. When was it exactly that you had applied for the position? It was the end of last month, right?
Right. I think I might have submitted my application January 25th or 6th. I know it was due February 1st, but I called to make sure that I could email or fact, and so I just emailed it to the person. And yeah, I mean, I got it done one day after class, and sat at work a little bit longer, and then the next morning, after I talked to some people and I contemplated on it, I sent it off that morning.
Yeah. That's why this feels a little different, because I've interviewed candidates that were running for city council.
Mhm,
And so with Corey Rodley and Johannes Tadeo, I interviewed both of them as they were running. And so
mhm.
and Chris McAllister as well. And three super important people in Springfield politics, and so that's why this one feels a little different, because this is so quick, such a quick turn,
Right.
and so that's why I wanted to ask about your parents, because I'm sure that their reaction when you call them, it's like they're like, "What? So wait a minute. So like 2 weeks ago you thought about this, or 3 weeks ago,
Mhm.
and now you're sitting on the city council in a town that you're fairly new to, 4 years or so. That's a pretty exciting thing." Now, you've lived in Springfield now, is that correct? 4 years.
Yes.
What is it that you found in the time that you've been here that you really love about it?
Um, Honestly, I like the kind of working class feel. I mean, granted, you have people from various demographics and classes that live here, but no one really tries to put on airs to impress anybody. You know, I think that, I mean, this sounds so simple, but customer service and like in restaurants is, to me, it's phenomenal. It's like people either faking it or they really do love what they're doing, and it just makes you feel whole. I mean, to be honest, there's some places where uh people really don't care, or maybe based on what you look like, people aren't going to be that nice to you. And I can't say that I've really experienced that in too many places in Springfield. I mean, you know, and honestly, this is really silly, but I like that that they season their food here at the restaurants. I'm from the South, and maybe we season stuff a little too much. But when I go out to eat in Springfield, for the most part, I know I'm paying for quality food that's made with love. That I'm not going to have to add too much seasoning to, which I don't like to do. Uh, and just that makes a huge difference. I think another thing I like about it is it's, I work on campus and I love students, but I don't necessarily always want to see them when I'm off. And most students don't go to Springfield. But honestly, the reason that they don't go is super problematic. I hear Springfield's the hood. It's like, no, it's not. You want to talk about hoods, we can go to some hoods,
Yeah.
Uh, and but I feel glad to, when I talk to people, be like, oh, you got to go here, you got to go here. oh, they don't have it there. Guess what? This store does. And I like that everything I need is within maybe 5 or 10 minutes of me. I live right in between Safeway and Fred Meyer. I can walk to get coffee. I mean, I guess I could walk to the mall. I haven't.
Right.
And it's just that great feeling of things being close and having everything you need. Uh, yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
I just
you're totally
like
right. It's true.
regular people.
I've lived in Springfield since I was 11 years old. I went to
Mhm.
Springfield High School. I ended up graduating from South. Just like you, I work on campus. I'm a barber. You work at the university.
Right.
But uh, you're so spot on when it comes to the type of culture of Springfield that there's this. It's very genuine what you're talking about the type of person in Springfield that worked customer service, that they wear their heart on their sleeve, and it's the customer service is genuine. I think it's not a front. I think that that's one thing about Springfield. There's one thing about Springfield High School when I was growing up here is that if anyone did have wealth, which there wasn't a lot of people that were very wealthy, but anybody that did, they hit it. It
Right.
wasn't like something that you want to brag about. And that's kind of where Oregon, that's an Oregon thing. We're kind of different from like maybe say California,
Mm.
like we kind of try to hide that comfort or whatnot. So that's really interesting to hear. I wouldn't say outsider perspective, but new to the community, and so you're part of
Mhm.
us now. So,
Mm.
so
Thank you.
that's cool. Now tell me what brought you to Oregon. What?
Um, okay, so I was living in Utah. I worked as a career coach at the University of Utah, and I also taught part-time at Salt Lake Community College. And I was looking to, it was time for me to go, just being honest. I had initially applied to a position at Portland State, and I was a finalist. And I didn't get it. This was probably summer 2016, but I kept on looking just at Oregon in general. Uh, I applied to position at Oregon State. I got an interview, but I didn't get it. But one of my fraternity brothers did, and I'm super super glad. But then I saw this position, and I was like, it was going to allow me to teach. It was going to allow me to do some advising, and it was going to allow me to potentially, implement some different initiatives around, diversity related stuff. And so I was like, why not? Pay was decent. I looked up, Eugene and just the area. Uh, I had a old Army buddy of mine who went to University of Oregon, I mean, years and years ago. And so I reached out to her, and yeah, I applied. I interviewed, and what's interesting is that I had gotten an offer from another school while I was waiting for my second interview here, but I turned it down because I just knew that this was going to be it. I've enjoyed working at flagship institutions. However, uh, I really like community colleges too. Just the type of student. I love building connections with community college and stuff too. So I don't want to sound elitist saying that I like working at flagship institutions. Um, but yeah, that's how I ended up here. I accepted in like November. Started packing right away, and packed everything up in the pod, and packed my car and drove here. Now how I ended up in Springfield was interesting. I was looking at apartments, and doing all kinds of distancing from campus and all this stuff. And I was on a dating website, and I had changed my city from Salt Lake City to Eugene, Oregon. And I was talking to a young lady, and I mean, we never ended up meeting, or I mean, we weren't compatible for whatever reason. But she told me about the apartments that I live in now. And so I checked them out. I made some phone calls, and I was like, wow, okay, perfect. Brand new. I'm the first person to ever live in them. And so that's actually how I ended up in Springfield on a dating website, talking to somebody about, you know, a little bit about the area. And she happened to mention this and sent me the link. And now here I am.
Yeah.
Thank goodness
Yeah.
that I landed in Springfield.
Oh, that's funny. So now you mentioned a little bit about the University of Oregon student perception of Springfield. So let's talk about
Yeah,
that a little bit. Now you have been here for 4 years.
right.
you've obviously been made aware of the history of, we'll just talk about some of the stereotypes, some like meth use, that kind of stuff. But the thing is that people in the position that you're taking over now and the mayor, you are the people that are going to be working to continue the changes in that.
Right.
We've made some just tremendous progress in the last 15 years in this community. And, uh, obviously you were talking about customer service. And one of the things that Springfield has changed is they kind of, back in the day, they had some of these kind of seedy bars that were right downtown Main Street. And they kind of pushed those out, brought in, breweries, a barber shop. They brought in some community hubs. And I know that City Council had a lot to do with that. It's kind of a pro-business mentality in Springfield.
Right.
And so what are some of the things that you'd like to implement to kind of continue that progress?
So, the ward that I'll be over pretty much starts on Q Street. And so there's some buildings right on Q Street, as well as in the Pioneer Plaza that, have been vacant for some time. And, it'd be great to get some smaller businesses in there and, get community members to support it. One thing I appreciate about Oregon as a whole, especially in counties, that people really support local businesses. And so, yeah, you can bring in chains certain places. I think they'll have jobs and they'll be supported. But if we get people feel comfortable enough to start a business or move their business to some of these empty buildings. Now, granted, I don't know that much about real estate and all that stuff, and I'm sure there's more to it than that, especially when it comes to costs and funding. But I just see, then I think about the mall and the things that we can put in there, and I think I think it'll bring jobs. I think that's one thing that we can do, But I think that the biggest way to make any change is to make people who live in the area feel comfortable there. I feel really comfortable telling people, you need to go to this restaurant, or maybe you should try this shop. Oh, hey, I haven't been here, but I've seen this. Or when somebody tells me to check something out, I go and check it out. And so I become, a cheerleader, ambassador, whatever you want to call it. And I think if more people did that, then yeah. But let's be real. University of Oregon's in a bubble. A lot of our students don't have cars, so they're not going to go to Springfield. And if they want to party or drink, Springfield is not it because it's too far from campus.
Right. And the bars are spread out.
Right. There's not much open now now with Taylor's and stuff being gone. But I think if you focus on public perception and you elevate the voices of those people who live there from various demographics and classes, then people will be like, oh, okay. But then you have to give people a reason to want, to come. Let's be honest. There's some parts of Springfield where if you aren't from that neighborhood, or it's like this in every city, that you're probably not going to be welcome, or people are going to be wondering why. And so how do we change that public perception? I think the first thing to do is to realize that there are problems with, racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, homelessness, drugs. We have to realize and embrace it, and realize that no matter how we identify, we're all affected by it. And then we have to be able to provide support for those people. And then by us coming together as a community, I think corporations and companies will see that. It's like, man, I think I'll be supported by this, and then people have a good experience and they tell another person. And one thing that you mentioned, especially with, people with Facebook and TikTok and Twitter and Instagram, all that stuff I don't use, you say, hey, man, this experience is great. Look at this picture. For example, I'm in the Eugene Foodies group. And granted, some of the stuff that people post, I'm just like, okay, whatever. But they'll go to different restaurants. A lot of them are in Springfield, and they'll take a picture of their plate, or they'll take a picture of an empty plate because they ate it before they could take a picture. And I think it's just simple stuff like that. You don't need some food critic telling you to go here, or you don't need some famous person saying, hey, go get your hair done there, or, try this thrift shop. It's a matter of the people who live there having a good experience and feeling comfortable enough to tell other people, hey, you need to try this. And I think, I've come to a point when I feel fairly comfortable about, different businesses that I know are only in Springfield. And I was like, you got to go here. And most of them are actually pretty much all of them are local businesses. And it's great because I live in a lot of cities where all you had is a bunch of chain restaurants.
Wow.
And so, yeah, I know I talk about food a lot, but I mean, I think that there are other, things. And for example, when I got here, they used to have like a 9 rounds, like boxing thing. Like I said, International Fitness had 2 gyms in Springfield. Now they don't. What can we utilize those places for? I mean, Pursue Fitness, which is my absolute favorite place in the state, is open. I mean, they're not in my ward, but they're so close by. And I love telling people, hey, you got to go there, man. Those people are nice. The manager's cool. It's big, it's clean. Once again, positive experience and feeling comfortable talking about that is what I think is going to cause any expansion for any city, whether it's for business, whether it's just for population in general, whether it's a student organization, an organization period, or clubs or councils, and even with politics. If my experience is halfway decent and I say, hey, guess what? I did this. I think you should too, or at least look into it. There are a lot of board seats. There are a lot of ways to get involved. Yeah, it's going to be a little time consuming, but put up or shut up. Let's get this done, and you'll be supported. Then that's how you get people to be more civically engaged, not by posting, or telling only your friends about it. Sure. You got to put the effort in to make people want to be a part of something. But then also sometimes you have to challenge those people. A lot of people talk, and they actually have the ability to do something, but they don't. And it's like, so what's the purpose of you continually talking if you're not going to do anything?
Right. Well, I think inclusion. I think people feeling included is what's really important for civic participation, instead of feeling like they don't have representation, which is a good segue into a question I had. I want to talk a little bit about why representation is so important. In your words, why is representation so important on the council?
Well, I mean, I think it's important because for too long, people have altered the definition of inclusion. They'll be like, oh, well, this person's this or this person's that, but they still see people who look and think just like them. And so they're comfortable with that, and like they don't want to be challenged. And so I think representation is very important because one, you're able to plant the seeds for the other generations. If you're doing this for yourself, then you're in the wrong field. But if you're doing this to potentially allow other people to see that they have the opportunity to do so, then I mean that's what's most important to me. Now, a lot of people are like, well, why does it matter? It shouldn't matter as long as they do the job, but they've also been represented their whole lives. Yes. And so it's easy for them to say that. But if they weren't represented, then they would probably have a fit. And so, but they don't understand that. And so they can't grasp why people would like to see somebody who looks or thinks or acts like them in a position like this.
You told me off air about this is a nonpartisan seat. This is not a party affiliation. And you would, is it true to say that you would say that you're not a Democrat or a Republican?
Very true. I mean, kind of what I mentioned before, I think all my life, I before I could even vote, I thought I was a Democrat because I remember in 1988 seeing Jesse Jackson running for president, and I knew who he was, and I was like, oh, I kind of like Michael Dukakis. Have no idea why I was 8. Love Bill Clinton. He was from the South, and then as it kind of went on, I think in a lot of ways I align with, Democratic efforts, at least what I thought were their efforts. But I was also in the military for 10 years, and, military is often heavily Republican, and I'm from the South. I mean, granted, Memphis is a blue dot because it has, 60-some% Black people. But, I mean, and I think now I I believe what I want, you know, and the two-party system is so problematic. You know, I remember in '92 when Ross Perot was running, and they can easily say that he cost either, you know, George H.W. The presidency because some people who probably would have voted for him actually voted for Ross Perot. And granted, I think he only maybe got 13% of the vote.
That's a lot.
But in
That's a lot.
these, yeah, it is. And in these, you know, current elections, uh, if there was a third party candidate, then the two parties would really have to fight and really have to put up or shut up for these votes. And so I guess the way I see it, I guess you can consider myself progressive. I believe in human rights. You know, I'm big on, you know, diversity. I'm big on inclusion. But the truth of the matter is that can be really off-putting in a lot of ways, especially here in Oregon. I mean, people love to talk about that stuff, but the people who are the loudest about diversity and inclusion are the ones who do not even associate with anybody. You know, it's like there's a difference between speaking for and speaking of a person. I mean, I'm straight, and so I don't need to be speaking for the LGBT community, but I can mention them, and I can also potentially provide a space. But, you know, so many people, especially in Oregon, be like, oh, well, I have a Black friend, I have a gay friend. So what? Sometimes those are the worst people. And I think a lot of those folks, especially here in Oregon, and it's unfortunate, they align with the Democratic Party. And it's kind of off-putting me. I don't know tons about the Republican Party here. But if there are these Proud Boys and, you know, these other folks, that's a huge problem. And so the reason I bring this up is so I think both parties, based on what you see, can be very polarizing to where you don't really want to be completely associated with one or the other. And then with just my background, even my education, you know, it's allowed me, I would like to say that I think for myself, you know, and I would like to think that it's influenced by my life experiences and my relationships and somewhat my book education. And so I think based on that, you know, it's kind of hard to align with the party. And, you know, we talked about inclusion and representation. I went on the, you know, you go on these party websites. I think on the Democratic Party, all I saw was James Manning, who looks like me.
Sure.
The Republican Party, I guarantee nobody looks like me. And so you talk about it, but where is representation in your parties? And so, yeah, I mean, who knows? I might end up, you know, aligning with the party sooner or later. But for right now, like I personally, I feel that it shouldn't matter what party I belong to if I am supporting the people.
Absolutely. And
But you know, let's be real. That's easier said than done because you're going to need support somewhere. And so I hope this doesn't come off like I'm shunning any political party. Because I mean, honestly, if I had to choose based on, you know, social awareness and social responsibility that you see more on the left, I would more align that way. But, you know, like I said, I'm from the South and and I'm ex-military. And so there's a lot of what people would consider to be conservative. But I mean, I think liberal and conservative are thrown around and left and right are thrown around so much, nobody really even knows what that means.
right. Well, in a position of city council too, you're going to represent people that you know, across the board and full and so it's important to find ways to allow people that maybe even you disagree with on strategy to be heard, you know,
Right.
right? You know,
I
now
agree.
with
Yeah.
representation, you had mentioned this a couple times, and I've talked about this on the podcast before, especially with my good friend Thomas Hieta. He's Asian and Asian American, and having he talks about seeing people even in movies that look. You've used the phrase a couple times that look like me, you know, and what does that feel like when you talked about Jesse Jackson, a
Mhm.
candidate? Because obviously, it's no secret that Springfield, Oregon, is not extremely diverse population numbers wise, you know.
Right.
You know, so it means a lot to see someone that looks like you in a position of power. Is that correct?
I think so, but let's be honest. I mean, here's the thing. Sometimes you put people who check one box. We talk about who check one box, but then they don't do anything. And so it's all performative,
Yes.
And yeah, I mean, it's cool. I'm Black, I'm a veteran. I hope people can align with that, but I'm not perfect. And Blackness is not a monolith, neither is being a veteran. So yeah, I mean, sometimes I think that sight of, oh, this person looks like me, I can identify. I remember there was something when President Obama was running, or maybe after he was elected, and it was a story about a little boy had touched his hair and how he was just blown away because somebody who had hair like him was a great position of power. And, who knows, that kid could end up becoming something, or maybe that kid might be motivated. And it's the little things. But like I said before, it's real easy to say that it shouldn't matter when you've been represented the whole time. Now, when it comes to movies and stuff like that, yeah, that's great. But realize that movies that have larger casts of minorities in them aren't the ones that people are rushing to see. People like say, well, it shouldn't be a Black movie. There shouldn't be a BET. Well, it's like, when was the last time you seen one of the TV shows on BET or one of the movies on BET being shown on CBS or ABC? You haven't. So that's why these things exist. And so let's not act like people who claim that it doesn't matter, they're rushing out to see a movie with an all Black or an all Asian cast, or a movie that focuses on LGBT issues. They're not doing it.
Sure. I'm a podcast host of a show that's pretty small. And so that being said, I'm a firm believer that not everything has to be for everyone either.
Right.
So what I mean by that is that those BET or the things that you mentioned, it's like, even if I may not watch it a ton, I'm glad it exists because there's people that get a lot of benefit from it.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Same with rap music. That like with rap music, like that's not my story. It still taught me a lot. You know what I mean? By listening and learning from it. And
right.
And your experience in Tennessee and my experience in Springfield, Oregon, growing up as a kid is going to be extremely different, but there's things we can learn from each other.
Very much so.
You had said something about a monolithic viewpoint. I want to admit kind of an ignorant thing that I had thought back in the day that I learned from. We have a mutual friend on Facebook. I don't know how well or how good a friendship or whatnot, a relationship you have with him. And I hope he's okay with me dropping his name, but Jason Floyd.
Yeah.
Okay. Jason Floyd was one of when I was a freshman in high school, and I hope he listens to this. When I was a freshman in high school, there was a group of kids that were skateboarders that would be on the edge of right outside of Springfield High School, skateboarding, kind of kick flipping off curbs and whatnot. I remember one time, and he may not remember this, but I remember one time I asked him, and it took me a little bit to ask this. There's racial tensions because of the facts that there's just not a lot of Black people, in Springfield. And I asked him, what do Black people think about this? And Jason looked me in the eyes, angry, and was like, why don't you ask them? Everybody thinks different shit. And it was a huge moment for me because I realized, I'm like, oh my God, I've been so wrong the way that I've looked at this.
Right.
Because I looked at it, like you just said, a monolithic viewpoint. Like everybody gets together and they're like, the Black Council, here's what we're gonna stand on this. People are people with different views, just like anything else. And that was a really profound thing for me. And I was really grateful that he had said that, because it really changed the way I looked at things. I kind of separated. It's an elephant in the room. Of course, we're going to talk about some of the things, especially in a town like Springfield, like I keep mentioning, that has a limited amount of diversity, So I just thought that was a bold thing that I really learned from moving forward. And I was pretty young when he told me that. Right. Jason is an awesome person. Shout out to Jason Floyd.
What's up, homie?
So, So one of the things that Sean Van Gordon, and then we'll get off the topic of race, but I do want to talk about this. One of the things that Sean Van Gordon had said in his State of the City was that one of his main goals in his term as mayor is he wants to fight white supremacy. And you had mentioned the Proud Boys, and how do we do that as a community? How do we, this is a difficult topic, because how on city council, what kind of things can be done to help fight that?
I mean, I think one thing is to admit that it exists and be somewhat confrontational and be like, look, you say you love this country, you say you want to do this, I guarantee you have these people who uh are driving around with the American flags or saying white lives matter. If you would have asked them where they're from, they'll give you a list of European countries. And it's like, you're proud of that. And so why can't other people be proud of, where they come from? And one thing that people fail to realize is that with a lot of non-white and even some, white presenting cultures, that stuff's not taught in school, you know. And so, it's real easy to talk about, we're all the same. Like I said before, when you've been educated that everything that your ancestors did was completely right. Uh, and so, I mean, to go back to your question, it's I think it's more than just confronting people who are racist. That's a huge part of it. But I mean, I think that white supremacy exists, in groups that are supposed to be progressive as well. A lot of people love to talk about how institutions of higher education are super liberal. And I was like, really? I don't think so. You know, uh, and I think I think it's a matter of sitting down and defining what that means, because often the definition is people who are blatantly and openly racist, or white men having all the power. But I think it goes way deeper than that. And so that's a really hard question to answer. I mean, I'm glad that the mayor mentioned that, but I'm curious to see what role that I will play, and other counselors, and then just the citizens of Springfield period will play in admitting that this is actually a problem, and that when people are saying this, they're not just saying this because they're in their feelings. They're saying this because it's true. And don't be so quick to try to deny it because you don't feel that way. One thing I've seen is that poor white people will quickly say that, oh no, because they'll bring up class, and to try to negate the fact that white supremacy exists. But the funny thing is that sometimes people who might be white, or any other race, are affected by white supremacy just like I am. Like I think about, I don't know if you've seen the movie Judas and the Black Messiah.
Not yet. Me too. Yes.
Absolutely amazing movie. And I won't go too deep into it, but Brother Fred Hampton was able to unite a Latinx group as well as a poor white group, waving Confederate flags, because they realized that, hey, we're all in this together, and this system is not designed for us, period. And so what good are we going to be fighting against each other when we can unite and have a united front? Granted, he was assassinated, so that's not necessarily a great end to a story. But when I think about Springfield specifically, I ask myself, why is it that people are so quick to assume that somebody's lying about being oppressed? All right. Have they been able to sit down and just talk with folks? I mean, are they able to remove themselves from the situation and not say I, and start thinking we? Because what people don't realize, regardless of whether you're white or not, white supremacy is going to take us all out.
Yeah.
It's going to reduce our opportunities. It's going to keep us from diversifying, and not even just from racially diversifying, from, socioeconomics, from, having opportunities for businesses to come into Springfield and create jobs. And so these attitudes are hurting all of us. And it's time to stop, y'all. So yeah, I'm kind of rambling now, but
No, I appreciate it. That's what a podcast is for. I don't know how to word this, because I never want to put the onus on the oppressed to be the better people. That's just not fair, right? Like, meaning we all have to change, like you had said. Have you ever seen the documentary though? It's called Accidental Courtesy, with a it's a guy, a black man, that befriended a bunch of white supremacists because he was saying he wanted to use the effort of love. I'm not saying this is the only strategy, but he wanted to use love and say, because what he knew was that in the leadership of the KKK, those people that were at the top, they weren't using love, they were using hate. And so this guy wanted to use love to basically say, like, a guy went to prison for some of the stuff that he did. It's a really great documentary. And the family, he was upstate, wherever they were at. And so this black man would drive this white woman to see her husband, who was a KKK member, in prison. Once a month, he'd take her. And the guy's like, "Why do you do this?" And he's like, "Because I love you." And the guy just couldn't understand it, and it was so touching to see. I thought that was an interesting thing. Now, I guess where this ties into what I'm talking about is that you can't send someone to jail for being racist, just for being hateful. You know what I'm saying? Like in fighting white supremacy. And one thing I've been thinking a lot about is, like, how do we persuade people, or how do we get people to understand, like you just said, there's so many benefits to culture. There's so many benefits to so many different ways of thinking. I don't know where the question is in this, but it's just something that, for one, anyone listening, check out the documentary Accidental Courtesy. That man was an inspiration. Now, I don't think that strategy, I don't want to put that on the oppressed. Again, it's like, oh, you should be loving, because it hurts when you don't feel like you're part of the equation, or you're not somebody that's easily accepted in the leadership role.
Right. So to be honest, I mean, that's cool. I tell you what, I'm not driving a white supremacist wife anywhere. I'm not even talking to her.
Yeah.
And I think that might work for some people.
Absolutely.
Sometimes, and I'm not trying to incite violence or even suggest it, but sometimes you have to fight fire with fire. I think a lot of people here have never been in a situation where they've had to truly protect themselves from, other maybe robberies or things like that, but from, any type of supremacy, and people are tired. And what happens when people get tired and angry, they explode. And sometimes people need that explosion. The unfortunate part about it is when marginalized groups explode, they become targeted even more. And so, and if they're defending themselves or trying to do better, a lot of times they're still targeted. And honestly, the same thing goes for like really poor people, which is so weird that so many poor people align with, very toxic and supremacist views. I don't know. I mean, like I said, I want to be very clear that I am not saying that you have to go out and arm yourself and stuff like that or anything but the truth matter, it's a war zone out there, and it's scary. My dad, and this is probably one of the most profound things he ever said to me, in my 40 years of life, he said, it really bothers me that my sons have to go through the same thing that I went through in the 60s. However, you all have it worse, because back in the day, we saw the Confederate flags and we saw the white sheets. Now they wear suits and ties, and they're your bosses and they're your coworkers. And it's like, man, that's crazy. Like yeah, I mean, like every time I say that, I get speechless and just, kind of taken back. And look, I mean, my boss is great. I don't, yeah, she's cool. I mean, so I'm not really saying that in any shape or form.
No. I got you.
But if you're too loud about an issue, people are going to take you down. If you're too quiet about it because you want to survive, people are going to say, "Oh, oh, there's no issue."
Right.
And it just seems like a losing situation. And so it's hard. I think, especially my conversations with Black people specifically here in Eugene, Springfield. Sometimes you don't want to be that voice of Blackness. Sometimes you just want to go to work, do your job, take care of your family, and chill. But oftentimes you're thrusting in that to protect other people and to support other people, and it's you can't. It's hard to just be here. But then the truth of the matter is, if some people have figured out how to just be, then other people say, "Oh, you don't care," or they see this person who seems to be complacent. They're like, "Oh, see, this Black person, they're cool." And, it's like, and going back to what you're saying, one person does not tell the narrative of a whole.
Absolutely.
Which is why, I don't think that every white person I meet is a white supremacist. I mean, that's ridiculous.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Nor do I think that every black person is going to have my back.
Right.
Yeah, and so yeah,
No,
exactly.
I just wanted to touch on that because I mean it's something that it'll be interesting to see what that looks like moving forward. I know that we have I don't know if it's been released, but the internal investigation, the independent investigation on what happened at the Black Lives Matter protest this summer, where in my word, these are my words, that I
Uh-huh.
watched the live stream and the police were imbalanced in the way that they were reacting to it. So we'll see what the independent investigation leads to. Mayor Van Gordon and I had discussed that briefly, but it was a very troubling thing to see because my take on it was watching this, and I'm not a big fan of people protesting in neighborhoods, and I've been pretty vocal about that. Now, that being said, when that whole situation with the noose or whatnot, this whole situation went down, blew up, it escalated. But then my takeaway after watching this live stream was like, what we just saw proved why they needed to be there. Why they needed to be doing this. Those are my opinions. But anyway, one of the things with representation that's super important, civic participation, which I mentioned before. I think, like you had said, as a young boy watching Jesse Jackson, I think there's going to be a lot of people in our community that are going to look to you, that are going to be like, wait a minute, if he can get into this position, I can get into that position down the road. And that's the goal that I think that we see from this. I don't want to make it, you said you don't want to be tokenized, and I don't want it to sound like that. I think that it's just really important, though, that we have these conversations about different perspectives, different kind of beliefs. And a lot of your experience isn't just from the takeaway from talking to you today. You're from a different state. You came from multiple different places, and I think that when we all in this big ass country, we start to learn from each other. If I were to move to Tennessee and start talking about my upbringing in Oregon, I'd have a lot of different insight on I would be able to take something from here there. You know what I'm saying? So we all have our shared collective stories that are very different.
Yeah, what if you ever move to Tennessee, do not take kale. I'm just saying, don't take it,
No,
and you can keep your IPAs.
yeah, that's hilarious. Now, you had mentioned you were a coffee drinker. Are you Dutch Bros or Starbucks?
Either I drink 7-Eleven coffee if I
There,
buy it.
there we go.
I drink. I mean, honestly, so when COVID hit, and I was working from home. I bought a little $10 coffee pot, and I just buy coffee that was on sale. I mean, sometimes I will buy the Starbucks ground coffee because I like some of their flavors, but sometimes I'll just go to Winco and just find whatever. I know that there's some local companies that sell coffee, but I'm going to be honest, like it's really hard for me to pay more than $7 for a bag of coffee
Sure. I
because
like
it's
Dunkin'
not that
Donuts.
serious.
I
Like
like Dunkin' Donuts because,
uh,
I don't know why. I just like it. Uh,
yeah,
so Damien Pitts, it's really cool to get to talk to you. I appreciate getting to know you a little better, and I look forward to getting to know you more down the road. I'm excited to see what happens in the future of Springfield. I love this town very much. It's my hometown. And I think that the leadership mix up that we've had over the last year and a half in Springfield leadership has been pretty cool to watch the process go.
Hmm.
Anybody listening, Mayor Van Gordon has made it very clear the way to get involved. Every Monday, City Council meets. Every other Monday, they go virtual and they, represent the City Council meetings. It looks a lot different now than it did 2 years ago, and I think this is really exciting to see where we're heading as a community. And so, yeah, I think we're going to do some great things in this community. I think that there's a lot of progress happening.
I hope so. And I hope that we realize that certain issues will affect everything. Kind of like what I was saying. Racism can affect economic development. It can affect homelessness. It can affect a lot of things. So I guarantee you, everyone in Springfield cares about something, and that they and every issue can be tied to something. And so we need to be able to think about that. We need to realize that sometimes it's not about our individual needs and wants. And part of being a citizen is sometimes thinking about that other person. But I mean, but I will admit, it's really hard sometimes to really care when you're going through so much yourself, and then there's a such thing as, burnout, or battle fatigue, especially racial battle fatigue, where you have to take a step back and just breathe in order to stay sane, to stay healthy, to be able to continue to support those that you already do. So yeah, I mean, I would say for everybody listening, keep your head up, find that outlet to breathe, whether it's Real Housewives or Schitt's Creek or one of these random Lifetime movies that I always get stuck on. And don't
You
even
like
talk
to,
about
I didn't add it in the bio of this, but you sent me a bio and I cut it a little bit for space. But
it.
you had talked about the Food Network. That's your happy place.
It is. I love to cook. I love to feed people, and I learn a lot. The one shows that I can't really watch the kids cooking shows, 'cause those kids are a little uppity, and it's like, man, you need to sit down somewhere, like calm down. Like, ain't nothing wrong with some SpaghettiOs and a hot dog. Uh,
Hilarious.
but yeah, and so definitely Food Network is my go-to. Sometimes I'll just listen to music. And I might have mentioned that, I watch telenovelas. I don't speak Spanish, but one thing I like about watching any TV shows or movies in a language that I don't understand, or an area that I'm not familiar with, is that even though it's fiction, I'm able to learn something. I learned quite a bit about various Latin American countries just by watching these novellas. I've watching, different movies, even like movies that were set in, like, England, or, East Europe, or somewhere in one of the, many African countries. And what it does, it kind of makes me start thinking. It makes me want to start doing, just basic, research on, or it'll solidify something that I thought I knew way back. And so that's why I watch a lot of those shows. I mean, I don't have time to be watching the news all the time, or, watching political stuff, because it's really depressing.
Sure.
And so I need to get away. And I think looking at food, looking at random TV shows, and, a couple of random other guilty pleasures I won't talk about,
Yeah.
as far as TV shows, then, you know, it allows me to breathe. There are a lot of documentaries I have not seen. I've never seen 13th. I've never watched When They See Us, and I probably won't. It's just too much for me right now.
Sure.
But I will watch old episodes of A Different World, or you know, Good Times, or I don't watch Friends and have never seen it. But just random TV shows, just to kind of get away. And I think that keeps me sane, and it puts me in a position to be able to support those that I will support, or that I do support. So yeah, I'm rambling, but
No, you're good. You're good. Well, Damien Pitts, thank you very much. I'm going to end this today with a song, and this is difficult. Anybody that knows me well knows that this last week was very difficult for me. I lost my brother, and I want to say thank you for all of the people that reached out, saying kind words and showing support, and saying that, I have, reminding me that I've got their number, and that just so many kind things that people said. My brother leaves behind his daughter, my niece, Alexis, and we're going to do everything we can to look after her. It's been challenging. It's kind of sudden. He's only 43, and so I just want to say thank you to everybody for reaching out. So I usually choose a song by a local artist, but this week I chose one I wrote a while back when my mom, my brother, and I were all on some completely different pages. We were all over the place. And I chose the song. It's called Turmoil Despair. And I chose it because I was thinking about one day I was going to be any one of us. The song is actually written so any one of us could come and listen to that song from a different perspective. And we could all be that one different perspective at different times in our journey. And so I thought it was fitting, but I just wanted to say thank you to everybody for reaching out. And so Damien Pitts, interim city councilor Damien Pitts, you'll be sworn in on Monday. I'm sure that's going to be an exciting day for you. Congratulations on the appointment and getting to talk to you. I think you're going to do a great job. I think you got a bright future in local politics, and you're one of us now in Oregon. And I hope that you feel loved, and I hope you feel welcomed. And thank you for doing my podcast. I'm so honored how this podcast has grown in the 3 years that I've done it. I don't know how the hell I did this. 5 years ago, I was a drunk, miserable person. And now I'm sober, and I'm even going through with what I'm going through, losing my brother. I'm the happiest I've ever been overall. And it's something it's hard for me to admit that, because sometimes I come from a place where depression's such a huge part of my family life that it makes me feel guilty to admit that I'm happy during a time of sorrow. But I think that I'm learning to never feel sorry for being happy. You know what I mean? Like, you should always embrace it. So I've learned a lot in these last 48 hours. I appreciate you doing this, because you had said to me, are you sure you want to do this behind the scenes? Like, with this, I'm like, no. What's important to me right now is to continue the path of what I'm up to, continue elevating voices in my community, in our community. And so it's an honor to have you on. So thanks again.
No, thank you so much.
Yeah, man. So, okay. So we're going to get out of here. So this is me back from my days as Self-Esteem But Willie. This is me with a song, Turmoil, Despair.
Can I borrow your thoughts on agony? Can we share a moment? Will you walk with me? Journey to a sacred place filled with disgrace, disgrace. Can I loan to you a dream of nothingness? Nonetheless, we feel displaced, displaced, erased. The time has come for moving to the light. I've grown exhausted of this endless fight. The time has come for moving to the light. I've grown exhausted of this endless fight. Turmoil, despair. You never seem to care. The struggle for stability seems to be crushing me. Every waking moment I wish I was a casualty. Signs point to a tragic end, my life feels empty. Think I'll lay in bed and reflect on everything. The struggle for stability seems to be crushing me. Every waking moment I wish I was a casualty. Signs point to a tragic end, my life feels empty. Think I'll lay in bed and reflect on everything. Blindsided by the back of your eyes, and I slept until I told no lies. Can I spend some time up inside your mind? Place a legacy significantly hidden, you will find. At a later date when I seem to be long gone, you'll need guidance on the path you are on. Self-sacrifice is a tool to obtain peace. Together we feel strength when we both feel weak. The time has come for moving to the light. I've grown exhausted of this endless fight. The time has come for moving to the light. I've grown exhausted of this endless fight. Turmoil, despair. You never seem to care. The struggle for stability seems to be crushing me. Every waking moment I wish I was a casualty. Signs point to a tragic end, my life feels empty. Think I'll lay in bed and reflect on everything. The struggle for stability seems to be crushing me. Every waking moment I wish I was a casualty. Signs point to a tragic end, my life feels empty. Think I'll lay in bed